speculation, all right? That's never...
Holy shit. Holy fucking shit.
All right. Cute.
Wait, one more. Code is... A real-life murder house. Oh. But if she
Stop
stabbed
him
him
with the umbrella. I know. Stop.
So cool. This is so cool. Richie, I mean.
Scott? Scott? Dude, where'd you go? Someone with a ghost mask on.
What are you talking about?
There's what? What?
Oh. Oh, that is so cool. Movies. I mean, come on. Look.
It looks so real.
That is...
What?
Oh, so this is it. You know, they say Billy was the mastermind, but...
Neither. You know that this is where Sidney dropped the TV on Stu's head?
Guys, there's a lot of theories out there that Stu survived. Let's check out the kitchen.
Fuck you.
Hey.
What the fuck?
Oh, you hit. It was a bad idea.
Yeah, of course it was a bad but it does.
No, like it.
Great talk.
Hey, morning. Okay. Busy?
4 espresso shots, please.
Yeah. I'll show you that your cape is beautiful.
No, house lights. Feeling freaked.
Okay, well, are you trying to kill me?
Sorry.
Yep, I'm here. I'm here. Sorry, Hannah. Oh, no, you're fine.
Hannah, darling.
My cue, it's my fault.
Tatum.
Is so definitely tell you though, I am currently outside of bitch.
Woodsboro. Just a sec.
He's going for Tatum.
All right, I'm on it. All available units.
The air in Pine Grove doesn't smell like victory. It smells like copper, wet asphalt, and the freezing realization that a mother's love is sometimes the very thing that sharpens the killer's blade. We look at Sidney Prescott in 2026 and we don't see a hero. We see a woman who is a walking graveyard. She thought she could bury the ghosts of Woodsboro in a quiet Indiana coffeehouse. But trauma isn't a memory. It's a rhythm. It's a pulse that beats in the throat of her daughter, Tatum. The irony is almost too heavy to breathe. Sidney named her child after a girl who died in a garage door 30 years ago, thinking it was an honor. In reality, she was pinning a kick-me sign on her daughter's soul for every psychopath with an internet connection. This film isn't just another slasher. It is a meditation on the burden of being a legacy. It asks a terrifying question. Is Sidney Prescott the victim? Or is she the spark that keeps the fire burning? When the sun finally rises over the carnage at the Evans household, the silence is deafening. The monsters are dead, but the weight they left behind is permanent. We see Sidney and Tatum sitting in the back of an ambulance, not as survivors, but as two people who finally realize that safety is a fairy tale we tell children so they'll go to sleep. In this world, the only thing you can trust is the feeling of a cold grip on a trigger. We're uncovering the hidden choices that turn a standard thriller into a study of human breaking points. This isn't just a recap. It's a surgical look at how a 30-year-old mistake evolved into a digital nightmare. We are tracking the invisible strings of obsession that pulled Sidney out of the light and back into the red mist of her own history. The blue and red strobes of the Pine Grove police cruisers don't bring the comfort they used to. In the freezing Indiana night of 2026, those lights are just the colors of another completed chapter in a book Sidney Prescott never wanted to write. As we look at the wreckage of the Evans household in the final moments of Scream 7, there's a texture to the air that feels heavy, almost oily. It's the smell of burnt gunpowder and the hollow metallic ringing in the ears that comes after you've finally stopped the screaming. This isn't a victory. It's a survival, and in the world of Sidney Prescott, survival is just a stay of execution. We find Sidney sitting on the back of an ambulance, a gray blanket draped over her shoulders like a shroud she's worn a dozen times before. She looks at her daughter, Tatum. This is the moment where the cinematic irony of the entire series finally curdles. For years, Sidney thought she was honoring a dead friend by giving her daughter that name. She thought she was keeping a piece of the light from 1996 alive. But standing there in the driveway, surrounded by the bodies of neighbors and friends, the weight of that choice becomes a crushing burden. She didn't give her daughter a name. She gave her a target. She whispered a ghost into the girl's ear from the moment of her first breath. And now, that ghost has finally materialized with a knife. The vibe of this resolution is starkly different from the previous entries in the franchise. There is no upbeat pop track or the sense that the final girl has conquered her demons. Instead, there is a chilling realization that the demons have simply moved into the next room. Observationally, look at Tatum's face. The girl played by Isabel May isn't the same person who was rehearsing a play just 48 hours ago. She has that Prescott stare, a 1,000-yard gaze that sees through the police tape and directly into the abyss. She just finished shooting a woman in the head, not because she wanted to, but because her mother's history demanded it. The killer, Jessica, was right about one thing. The cycle is a predator, and it just found fresh meat. When we see Mark being loaded into the ambulance, the police chief and husband who tried to play the hero, the irony is thick enough to choke on. He's a man of the law, a man of rules and protocols. But none of that mattered in the face of a neighbor who decided that Sidney's life was a script she wanted to rewrite. The choice to have the killer be a fan of Sidney's own autobiography, Out of Darkness, is the ultimate betrayal of the healing narrative. Sidney wrote that book to exorcise her ghosts, but all she did was provide a roadmap for new ones to find her. It's a philosophical gut punch. The very act of Sidney trying to move on is what drew the shadows back to her door. Her words didn't heal. They inspired a new brand of madness. Kevin Williamson crafts an ending that feels like a funeral for the idea of normalcy. As Sidney tells Tatum about her namesake, the original Tatum Riley, it doesn't feel like a story of friendship. It feels like a warning. She's explaining the heritage of the gore. She's telling her daughter that being a Prescott means you are born into a war that never actually ends. The silence between them as they head toward the hospital is louder than any jump scare. It's the sound of a childhood ending and a grim, cold-blooded legacy beginning. The human cost here isn't just the body count, it's the erosion of the soul. Sidney looks at Gale Weathers, and for the first time in 30 years, there is no spark of competition or journalistic snark. There is just the weary recognition of two soldiers who are too tired to keep track of the casualties. Gale's presence here, battered and scarred from her own brushes with the blade in New York, reinforces the idea that there is no after. There is only the between, the quiet time between the masks. Sidney's trust in Gale at the end is a surrender to the fact that they are the only two people left who speak this specific, bloody language. There is a specific rhythm to how the camera lingers on the Tatum name on the back of the girl's jacket. It's a visual ghost. The director is forcing us to acknowledge that Sidney's attempt to create a new beginning was always flawed because it was rooted in the graveyard of her past. You can't build a white picket fence out of the bones of your friends and expect the wolves not to smell them. The ending of Scream 7 suggests that the final girl isn't a trophy you win. It's a virus you pass down. As the ambulance pulls away, leaving the Pine Grove neighborhood to the press teams and the vultures of the press, we are left with the image of Sidney's hand gripping Tatum's. It's a grip of desperation, not just love. It's the feeling of a mother realizing she has initiated her daughter into a cult of violence. The sunrise of Ghosts refers to that moment of clarity at dawn when you realize that even though the sun is up, the shadows aren't going anywhere. They've just changed shape. They're no longer hiding in the attic or behind a voice changer. They are sitting right next to you, reflected in the eyes of the child you tried so hard to protect. The cinematic choice to end with Mindy Meeks Martin giving a news report is the final twist of the knife. It turns the tragedy back into content. It reminds us that while Sidney and Tatum are bleeding, the world is just waiting for the next update, the next podcast, the next primo story. The horror isn't just the man with the knife. It's the society that watches the broadcast and asks for an encore. Sidney's victory is hollow because she knows that as long as she is alive, as long as she is the final girl, someone, somewhere, is picking up a mask and practicing the voice. The weight of the 2026 Indiana massacre will settle into the soil of Pine Grove, and Sidney will try to find a new house, a new town, a new way to hide. But we see it in her eyes. She knows the truth now. The ghosts don't haunt houses, they haunt the blood. And Tatum, poor Tatum, has just had her first taste of the family trade. The sunrise doesn't bring a new day. It just illuminates the bodies left on the lawn. This is the ultimate irony of the Prescott bloodline. To save your life, you have to lose your humanity, piece by piece, until there's nothing left but the gun and the ghost. And the cycle begins its long, slow crawl toward the next scream. The opening minutes of Scream 7 don't just invite us back into the world of the Woodsboro murders. They force us to confront the grotesque way we consume human suffering as entertainment. There is a specific, nauseating texture to the Masher House experience that Scott and Madison are so eager to soak in. It's a vibe that feels cheap, artificial, and deeply disrespectful to the ghosts that are supposed to inhabit these walls. As a cinematic philosopher, I look at this opening and see a biting critique of the modern true crime obsession. A world where a site of absolute slaughter is repackaged as a theme park attraction for people who have never felt the cold weight of a blade. The irony of this sequence is thick enough to choke on. Here we have two fans, Scott, a stab obsessive, and Madison, his reluctant but participating girlfriend, walking through a replica of the house where Sidney Prescott's life was shattered in 1996. They talk about the closet Sidney hid in, and the umbrella she used to stab Billy, as if they are discussing props in a high school play rather than instruments of survival and death. The choice to frame this as a tourist experience is a brilliant, if cruel, script audit by the creators. They are pointing a finger at us, the audience, and the characters who treat Sidney's trauma as premium content. Scott and Madison aren't there to pay respects. They are there for the photo op, the check-in, and the bragging rights of standing where the legend began. The atmospheric dread of this scene doesn't come from the shadows, but from the realization that these kids are so detached from reality that they don't recognize death when it's standing right in front of them. When the ghost face figure appears behind a motion sensor, Scott's reaction is one of pure, fanatical joy. He admires the high-tech nature of the scare. He critiques the realism. This is the ultimate mistake of the modern horror fan. The belief that knowledge of the rules provides a layer of armor. Scott knows the math of 1957 versus 1958 in Friday the 13th, and he knows the birth year of Mrs. Voorhees. But he has no idea how to read the intent behind a real person's eyes. His obsession with the Stewhead versus Billy mastermind debate is a hollow intellectual exercise that completely ignores the human cost of their actions. To him, Stumacher isn't a serial killer. He's a favorite character in a franchise. There is a profound sense of mockery in the air during this sequence. The fake blood on the walls, the roasting Amber Freeman jokes in the kitchen, it all serves to turn Sidney's agony into a punchline. This is the moral flip of the film's intro. We are led to believe these are our protagonists, but they are actually the very people who have kept the cycle of violence alive by commodifying it. Every podcast Scott listens to, every stab movie he celebrates, adds a brick to the wall that keeps Sidney Prescott trapped in her past. When the real ghost face finally strikes, it feels less like a tragedy and more like a grim correction of the record. The film is saying that you cannot play in the blood of the dead without eventually getting some on your hands. The vibe of the trivia game is where the tension truly begins to vibrate. It's a classic Scream trope, but in 2026 it carries a different weight. The questions aren't just about movies. They are about the character's right to be in that house. Get one wrong, and you die is the ultimate cinematic irony for a pair who claim to be experts. The trick question about Jason Voorhees never drowning is a meta-commentary on how we misremember the very things we claim to love. Scott gets the math right, but he misses the spirit of the story. He is so focused on the technical details, the numbers of the drowned date, that he fails to see the predator in the room. Madison is the one with the intuition, the one who senses that something is different about the way the mask moved. But in the presence of Scott's loud, aggressive fandom, her survival instinct is muffled. The isolation of the Mocker house, standing out there at the end of a long drive, reinforces the idea that these characters have wandered into a dead zone where the rules of the civilized world no longer apply. The texture of the scene changes the moment Madison enters the hallway. The laughter dies, and the silence that replaces it is heavy and cold. The phone call she receives, it's not Scott, is the spark that finally burns away the experience and replaces it with the event. The scary voice thing, which she initially finds sexy or cute, is a direct callback to the way we have romanticized the Ghostface persona. We've turned a monster into a Halloween costume, a voice changer app, and a sex symbol. The killer's response, "The fun part is over," is a brutal dismissal of the entire stab subculture. The kill itself is executed with a kinetic, messy rhythm that stands in stark contrast to the clean-handed, theatrical scares of the Mocker House tour. When the knife finally enters the frame, it isn't cool or high-tech. It is a jagged, ugly piece of reality that tears through the synthetic nostalgia Scott and Madison were trying to live in. The fire that Ghostface sets at the end of the sequence is a symbolic burning of the franchise's history. It's a choice that suggests this new killer isn't here to celebrate the past. They are here to cremate it. They are punishing the fans for their voyeurism. They are telling us that the Mocker House experience is over, and the Prescott reality has begun. This opening sets a grim tone for what's to come in Pine Grove. It establishes that the new Ghostface is tech-savvy, well-informed, and deeply nihilistic about the rules of horror. By killing the fans, the killer is clearing the board. They are removing the people who think this is a game so they can get to the woman who knows it's a funeral. The mockery of 1996 isn't just a plot point, it's a statement of intent. The film is telling us that the nostalgia we feel for the original Scream is a dangerous, poisonous thing. It's a shadow that obscures the real danger. Watching the house go up in flames, with the fake blood melting into the real gore of Scott and Madison, we are left with a feeling of profound unease. The director has used our own love for the series against us. He has shown us that the Mocker House is no longer a place of memory, it is a factory for new traumas. As we transition to Sidney's quiet life in Indiana, the weight of that fire follows us. We know that the piece she has built is just a thin layer of ice over a very deep, very dark lake. The mockery is finished. The reality of the blade is all that remains. The stab era is dead, and the era of the Prescott vengeance is about to be reborn in the most painful way possible. This isn't about trivia anymore. It's about the bill finally coming due for 30 years of surviving. The air inside the recreated Mocker house feels like stale stage makeup and cheap ambition. It is a museum of misery, a place where every floorboard is a lie and every shadow is bought and paid for. As we move into the heart of the opening sequence of Scream 7, we are forced to sit with the vibe of artificiality. There is something deeply unsettling about seeing a site of absolute human wreckage turned into a playground for the bored. Scott and Madison aren't just visitors. They are participants in a ritual of forgetting. They have replaced the genuine horror of 1996 with a sanitized, gamified version of the events. And the cost of that choice is about to be tallied in blood. The trivia game initiated by the Ghostface voice over the intercom is the ultimate cinematic irony. It isn't just a nod to the original Casey Becker scene, it's a modern subversion of it. In the first movie, the trivia was about survival. Knowing the rules might have bought you a second of life. But in 2026, the trivia is a weapon of mockery. The killer isn't testing Scott's knowledge. The killer is proving that Scott's knowledge is useless. Scott's arrogance is his greatest burden. He answers the questions about a nightmare on Elm Street and the people under the stairs with a smug, self-assured rhythm, as if his encyclopedic memory of the stab movies is a protective circle drawn in salt. He doesn't realize that the rules have changed because the person behind the mask no longer cares about the genre. The philosophy of the Stab fan is rooted in a dangerous kind of entitlement. Fans like Scott believe that because they have seen the movies 100 times, they own the story. They feel a sense of kinship with the killers. Scott even calls himself a stewhead, without ever stopping to consider the actual weight of the gore. He views the Billy versus Stu debate as a fun intellectual puzzle, ignoring the fact that for Sidney Prescott, these names represent the people who butchered her mother and tried to carve her out of existence. The director's choice to have Scott fail on a trick question about Jason Voorhees is a brilliant bit of writing. It highlights the gap between knowing the facts and understanding the feeling. Scott gets the math right. He calculates the years and the flashbacks with a cold, detached precision. But he misses the point. The point isn't the date. The point is the trap. The transition from fun and games to fear and flight happens in the space between two breaths. Madison's unease is the vibe check the audience needs. She isn't a stab obsessive. She's just a girl who went along with a pushy boyfriend's hobby. Her intuition is screaming, but it's muffled by the thick layer of irony that Scott has built around them. When she mentions that the scary voice is sexy, we see the grotesque way our culture has romanticized the predator. We've turned a faceless butcher into a flirtatious icon, a voice changer app that people use for pranks. The killers snap back to reality. The fun part is over, is a violent rejection of that romance. It is the moment the story stops being a game and starts being a hunt. Observationally, the vibe of the replica house changes as the lights flicker. The fake blood on the walls starts to look far too much like the real thing under the harsh, uneven strobe. The high-tech motion sensors that Scott admired so much become voyeuristic eyes, tracking their movements as they realize they are locked in. This is the human cost of being a fan in the Scream universe. You spend your life looking at the mask, and when the mask finally looks back, you realize you have no idea who is behind it. The isolation of the house, tucked away at the end of a long, dark road, becomes a character in itself. It is a space where the world cannot hear the screaming, a perfect vacuum for a killer who wants to make a statement. The choice to have Ghostface mock the 5-star review system is a sharp critique of our modern, feedback-obsessed society. Everything in 2026 is a content experience that requires a rating. The killer is pointing out that we have reviewed Sidney's life as if it were a restaurant or a hotel stay. We've given the Woodsboro murders 4 stars for pacing and scares while forgetting that the people involved are still bleeding. This is the moral flip of the chapter. We are meant to feel sorry for Scott and Madison, but we are also forced to realize that they are the ones who paid for the ticket to this slaughterhouse. They invited the shadow in because they thought it would be a primo story for their own lives. The actual violence, when it finally arrives, lacks the theatricality of the Stab movies. It is kinetic, messy, and ugly. There is no cinematic beauty to the struggle in the hallway. It's just the sound of heavy breathing, the scuff of shoes on a fake floor, and the wet, heavy thud of a blade finding its mark. This is the script audit of the opening. The director is telling us that the Stab movies lied to us. They made the kills look like a rhythm of red, but the reality is just a mistake made in the dark. Scott's knowledge of horror didn't give him an edge, it just made him slower to realize he was dying. The philosophy of this sequence is about the burden of knowledge. In the previous Scream films, knowing the rules was a superpower. In Scream 7, it is a distraction. The new killer knows that the fans are obsessed with the past, so they use that obsession as a lure. They play the hits. They use the voice. They use the mocker house. They give the fans exactly what they want, a real-life murder house experience, and then they reveal that the experience comes with a permanent price. The irony of Scott being a stewhead is finalized when he is killed in the house where his idol died. He wanted to be part of the legend, and now he is, as another entry in the obituary column. As the house begins to burn, the vibe is one of absolute finality. The replica, the trivia, the photos, the 5-star reviews, it all goes up in a cloud of toxic smoke. The director is clearing the board of the true crime junkies, so the real story can begin. We are left with the freezing realization that the Stab era is a joke that has gone on too long. The new Ghostface isn't interested in being a movie star. They are interested in being a ghost in the truest sense of the word, a presence that you cannot escape. A shadow that doesn't care if you know the trivia or not. When we finally leave the burning ruins of the Mashur replica and head toward the quiet, fearful streets of Pine Grove, the weight of the trivia game stays with us. It reminds us that knowing the math of a nightmare doesn't stop the nightmare from happening. It reminds us that Sidney Prescott's life is not a game, even if the world has spent 30 years trying to turn it into one. The trivia is dead. The stab fan is dead. All that is left is the mother, the daughter, and the blade that has been waiting in the dark since 1996. The human cost has just been recalculated, and Sidney is the one who will have to pay the bill. The vibe of the film has transitioned from a mockery of the past into a terrifying, high-stakes hunt for the future, and no amount of movie knowledge is going to make the next cut any less deep. The hallway of the Mocker House replica isn't just a corridor, it's a throat. It's a narrow, suffocating space designed to funnel a victim toward a dead end, draped in the skin of a 1990s nightmare. As we watch Madison walk away from the safety of the living room, leaving behind the trivia and the posturing, we are witnessing a specific kind of modern error. We call it the Madison Mistake. The belief that the world is a stage and that every threat is just a bit of clever theater. In the world of Scream 7, this mistake is the ultimate weight. A burden that turns a simple bathroom break into a one-way trip into the dark. The situation is deceptively mundane. Madison is bored, slightly annoyed, and looking for a moment of privacy in a house that is literally built to be a voyeur's paradise. But the vibe shifts the moment she steps onto those floorboards. The rhythm of the film slows down, the upbeat energy of the experience curdling into something cold and jagged. When her phone rings, it's the spark that ignites the terror. The digital tether, that glowing screen we all carry as a shield, suddenly becomes the very thing that lets the monster in. When the voice on the other end calmly states, "It's not Scott," the irony of her situation becomes a physical pressure. She is standing in a house dedicated to a killer, looking for her boyfriend who is obsessed with that killer. And she is being told by the ghost himself that the person she trusts is no longer an option. Observationally, Madison's reaction is a perfect study in the human cost of irony. She doesn't scream immediately. She doesn't run. Instead, she tries to play along. She calls the scary voice sexy. She tries to maintain the vibe of the night, the idea that this is all just a high-end prank, a primo bit of immersive theater. This is the mistake in its purest form. The assumption that evil has a sense of humor, or that a predator is interested in a witty exchange. The cinematic philosopher in me sees this as a critique of how we have processed horror in the 21st century. We have become so used to the stab movies, so used to the memes and the costumes, that we have forgotten that the mask is supposed to hide a person who wants to rip your guts out. Madison's attempt to flirt with the nightmare is her final choice, a mistake made of pure social media era arrogance. The isolation she feels in this moment is absolute. In 2026, we are told that we are never alone, that we are part of a global rhythm of connections. Madison has a high-speed link in her pocket. She has the experienced staff somewhere in the building. She has Scott just a few rooms away. And yet, as she stares down that dark hallway, she is more isolated than Sidney Prescott ever was in 1996. Sidney had a town in a frenzy, a news van on her lawn, and a best friend within earshot. Madison has a silent house and a digital connection that is being used as a leash. The killer isn't just in the house. The killer is in her ears, in her head, controlling the very rhythm of her heartbeat. No one hears the theater scream because the theater has been designed to make screaming part of the experience. When the reality finally hits, it isn't a spark of heroic action. It's a moment of paralyzing regret. She looks for Scott, calling his name into the shadows, but the only response is the heavy, wet sound of a blade finding a new home. The mistake was thinking Scott was the lead in this story. Scott was just a fan, a consumer, a person who thought he could buy a ticket to a slaughter and not be part of the inventory. His absence in this scene is the loudest thing about it. He is a ghost before he's even a corpse, his stew-head obsession finally meeting the rhythm of a real-life mosher. Madison is left to pay the bill for a hobby she didn't even enjoy. The chase through the replica house is messy and frantic. It lacks the shape of a choreographed stunt. It's just a girl stumbling through a dark imitation of a dead man's home, realized in a jagged, uneven rhythm of panic. The director uses the house's layout to create a feeling of absolute claustrophobia. Every door she opens leads to another memory of a 1996 murder. She's running through a museum of her own impending death. The human cost is her realization that she is a secondary character in a story she didn't want to be in. She is dying to provide a hook for a story about Sidney Prescott, a woman she's never met, The killer's final line before the blade falls, "They never make it in time," is the ultimate script audit. It's a meta-commentary on the entire genre, but it's also a cold, hard truth about the world Madison lives in. In a world of instant updates and live streaming, help is still minutes away, while death is only inches. The connection she relied on, the phone that was supposed to keep her safe, was just a way for the killer to time her demise perfectly. The vibe of the kill is one of absolute nihilism. It isn't a sign of anything. It's just the end of a girl who made the mistake of thinking the experience was for her entertainment. The fire that Ghostface sets to the mocker replica is the final mistake of the sequence. The belief that you can contain the ghosts of the past in a wooden box and not expect them to burn the whole world down. As the flames lick the fake blood off the walls, the vibe is one of erasure. The killer is burning the fandom. They are burning the trivia. They are burning the people who thought they could peer into the dark and come back out with a 5-star review. The Madison Mistake is the mistake of a whole generation that thinks reality is something you can toggle on and off. When we transition from the burning ruins in Woodsboro to the quiet, fearful streets of Pine Grove, the weight of Madison's isolation follows us. It reminds us that no matter how many connections we have, we are all just one phone call away from being completely alone in the dark. The rhythm of the film has moved from the artificiality of the tour to the brutal reality of the hunt. Sidney Prescott is out there, thinking she's safe, thinking she's built a wall between herself and the masks. But the Madison Mistake proves that walls are just things that keep you from seeing the person with the knife until they're already inside. The burden of the story has shifted, and the cost is only going to get higher from here. The fire hasn't ended the experience, it's just turned it into a rhythm of ashes that is blowing towards Sidney's front door. The transition from the burning, jagged ruins of the Woodsboro replica to the golden hour glow of Pine Grove, Indiana, is a sensory lie. It is a calculated shift in the vibe of the film, moving from the overt gore of a slaughterhouse to the suffocating, quiet pressure of a suburban dream. As a cinematic philosopher, I look at the way the camera frames Sidney Prescott's new life, and I don't see a woman who has found peace. I see a woman who has built a high-end, aesthetically pleasing cage. The texture of Pine Grove is too soft, the colors too saturated, and the silence too heavy. It is a false peace, a fragile layer of ice over a dark, deep lake of repressed memory. In these moments, Sidney is attempting the impossible. She is trying to outrun her own rhythm. She has a husband, Mark Evans, a man of law and order who represents the ultimate shield against the madness of her past. She has a thriving coffee house, a social hub where she can control the feeling of her environment, surrounding herself with the mundane chatter of a town that doesn't know her as a scream queen. But the weight of her history is present in every choice she makes. Look at her eyes as she moves through her house. She isn't just checking the locks. She is interrogating the very air for the scent of a shadow. Her life is a choice made out of fear, a barricade built of lattes and school schedules. The domestic fragility of this sequence is most evident in the presence of her daughter, Tatum. The burden of that name is a silent shiver that runs through every scene they share. Sidney named her child after a ghost, a girl who was crushed by a garage door while Sidney was busy surviving her first event. By giving her daughter that name, Sidney didn't just honor a friend. She anchored her child to a graveyard. It is a profound mistake of the heart, a feeling that if she kept the name close, she could somehow protect the soul attached to it. But in the world of Scream 7, names are leashes. Tatum Evans is the physical spark that keeps the past from ever truly fading. She is the living reminder that Sidney's peace is bought with the blood of others. The vibe of their home is one of modern security and vintage warmth, but the texture of it is claustrophobic. Every high-definition camera, every smart lock, every motion sensor is a sign of Sidney's lack of trust in the world. She has turned her home into a fortress, but a fortress is just a different kind of prison. She is trapped by her own vigilance. She cannot even enjoy a quiet evening without her mind drifting to the rhythm of the blade. The false peace of Pine Grove is maintained by a constant, low-level dread that hums in the background like a faulty appliance. Sidney is waiting for the other shoe to drop, and because of this, she is never truly present in her own life. She is a ghost in her own living room, haunted by the weight of what she knows is coming. Observationally, the film uses the texture of the town to emphasize Sidney's isolation. Pine Grove is a town of good mornings and have a nice days, a place where the biggest scandal is a parking ticket. It is the absolute antithesis of Woodsboro. And yet, Sidney sticks out like a jagged piece of glass in a bowl of soft fruit. Her rhythm is faster, sharper, and more defensive than anyone else. When she talks to Mark, played with a sturdy, grounded feeling, the gap between their realities is clear. Mark lives in a world of facts and duties, while Sidney lives in a world of shadows and grief. He sees a town that needs a police chief. She sees a hunting ground that hasn't been discovered yet. The cinematic philosopher must ask, is Sidney the victim of this false peace, or is she the architect of it? She has created a world where she is the center of a rhythm of safety, but it is a mistake of ego to think she could ever be truly safe. The spark of the nightmare is always there, hiding in the attic of her mind. The naming of the coffee house, the way she interacts with the local techie kids, the way she hoards her trauma like a secret, it all points to a woman who is addicted to her own survival. She doesn't know how to exist without the threat. The false peace is a performance she gives for her family, a script she reads from every day to convince them, and herself, that the shadow has stayed in California. But the weight of the film's 2026 setting suggests that there is no hiding anymore. In a world of total connectivity, a false peace is an expensive lie. The digital shadow is always watching. Every time Sidney checks her phone, every time she looks at the news, she's inviting the rhythm of the outside world back into her cage. The choice to move to Pine Grove was an attempt to change the texture of her life. But you cannot change the feeling of your soul by moving to a different zip code. Sidney is the magnet for the mask. Her very existence is a spark for the obsessed, the broken, and the cruel. The domestic fragility of the chapter reaches a peak during a simple conversation between Sidney and Tatum. There is a weight to the way Sidney looks at her daughter, a feeling of intense, almost suffocating protection. She's trying to keep Tatum unafraid, but in doing so, she is making her vulnerable. She is shielding her from the truth of her own history, creating a mistake of ignorance that the killer will eventually exploit. The false peace is a cocoon that prevents the butterfly from ever learning how to fly. It is a choice made of love, but it carries a human cost that is almost unbearable to contemplate. The vibe of Pine Grove's peace is ultimately a rhythm of denial. The town is beautiful, the people are kind, and the coffee is hot. But Sidney knows that the air is thin. She knows that the shadow is just a phone call away. The false peace isn't a refuge, it's a stage. And as the sun sets over the perfect Indiana horizon, the texture of the night starts to change. The warm glow is replaced by a cold, sharpening feeling. The spark has already been lit in Woodsboro, and the rhythm of blood is already moving toward Sidney's front door. The cage is about to be rattled, and the false peace of Sidney Prescott is about to be revealed for what it truly is. A temporary resting place for a woman who has never stopped running from a ghost. This is the burden of being Sidney. You can build the most beautiful cage in the world. You can name your children after your heroes, and you can marry a man of the law. But the shadow doesn't care about your choices. It only cares about the rhythm of the kill. And in Pine Grove, that rhythm is about to become the only music anyone can hear. The false peace is over. The Prescott reality is back, and it's hungrier than ever. The human cost of Sidney's retirement is about to be tallied, and the bill is going to be paid in the currency of her own family's safety. The cage is open, and the ghost is already inside. The bedroom of a teenager is supposed to be a sanctuary of secrets, a place where the outside world is held at bay by posters and discarded clothes. But in the Evans household, the vibe of a bedroom is something far more fragile. There's a specific, jagged rhythm to the way moonlight hits a window pane in Pine Grove. It's a cold, silver light that doesn't just illuminate, it exposes. When Ben, Tatum's boyfriend, slides that glass upward and rolls onto the floor, he thinks he is participating in a timeless rite of passage. The romantic choice of a boy who can't wait until morning to see the girl he loves. But as a cinematic philosopher, I see the mistake in every movement. Ben isn't just a boy in a window, he is a ghost of 1996, a physical echo of Billy Loomis that turns a teenage antic into a visceral spark of trauma for the woman downstairs. The situation is a direct, cruel callback to the night Sidney Prescott's world first began to bleed. The director isn't just playing with nostalgia here, he is weaponizing it. He is showing us that for Sidney, there is no such thing as a harmless teenage mistake. When she hears that window slide, the feeling isn't one of maternal annoyance. It is a weight that drops in the pit of her stomach, a rhythm of memory that takes her back to the smell of popcorn and the sound of a voice changer. To any other mother in Indiana, a boy sneaking in is a reason for a stern lecture. To Sidney, it is a crime scene in the making. It is the parental dread realized, the terrifying observation that her daughter is unknowingly inviting the past into her bed. The texture of this scene is suffocatingly tense. Look at the way the camera lingers on Sidney's face as she enters the room. She doesn't see a nice guy like Ben. She sees a predator in training. She sees the shadow of the boy who killed her friends, who slept with her, and then tried to carve her heart out. The irony is that Ben truly believes he is the hero of a different kind of movie. He thinks he's in a romance, a stab fan's version of a love story. But the choice to enter through the window is a violation of the false peace Sidney has worked so hard to maintain. It is the moment the barricades fail. It is a sign that the fortress she built in Pine Grove has a glaring structural flaw: her daughter's heart. Observationally, the film highlights the human cost of Sidney's vigilance. She treats Ben with a cold, sharpening feeling that borders on the antagonistic. To Tatum, her mother is being an overprotective hypocrite, a woman who has forgotten what it's like to be young. But the weight of Sidney's history is a burden that Tatum cannot see. Sidney isn't being a mom. She is being a survivor who recognizes the rhythm of the kill. When Ben tries to play it off with a smile, the cheesy charm of a high school athlete, the vibe in the room becomes toxic. Sidney knows that every good guy is just a mask that hasn't been removed yet. The parental dread is the knowledge that she has raised a daughter who is too soft for the world they actually live in. The cinematic philosopher must look at the mistake of Ben's character. He is an interesting mix of brains and brawn. A kid who studies computer science, but also wants to play the part of a romantic rebel. In 2026, the window trauma is amplified by the digital world. Ben isn't just a physical presence, he is a spark of connectivity. He represents the way the outside world, the stab world, leaks into Sidney's sanctuary. The irony of Ben's obsession with Stab and his desire to be part of Tatum's life creates a rhythm of suspicion that Sidney cannot ignore. She sees the shadow of Billy Loomis in his every smirk, his every attempt to be deep. The burden of the name Tatum is finalized in this scene. Sidney named her daughter after a girl who died in a garage, a girl who was the ultimate best friend trope until she became a casualty. By naming her child Tatum, Sidney was trying to reclaim the vibe of that lost friendship. But now, she has to watch Tatum repeat the same mistake of trusting a boy with a choice for windows over doors. The parental dread is the realization that history doesn't just repeat, it rhymes. The rhythm of 1996 is playing again, and Sidney is the only one who can hear the music. She is trapped in a loop of her own making, a ghost in a house of her own design. The texture of the conversation after Ben leaves is one of absolute disconnection. Sidney tries to explain the feeling of danger, but Tatum only hears the weight of a lecture. The false peace of their relationship is cracking under the pressure of the shadow. Sidney realizes that she cannot protect her daughter from the rhythm of her own life. She has spent 17 years trying to build a shield. But the window trauma proves that the shadow doesn't need to break down the door. It just needs a girl who is willing to unlock the latch. The human cost is the slow, agonizing erosion of the bond between mother and daughter. A mistake of secrets that is about to become a rhythm of blood. The cinematic philosopher sees the window as more than just a piece of glass. It is a vibe of vulnerability. It is the choice to be seen and the mistake of being found. Sidney's reaction to Ben is the spark that sets the rest of the film in motion. Her suspicion, her parental dread, her refusal to trust the nice guy. These aren't just traits. They are the texture of her soul. She is a woman who knows that the shadow is always hungry, and that it always starts with a boy in a window. The rhythm of the film is now shifting from the domestic to the defensive. The false peace is dead. The window trauma has opened the door to the Prescott reality, and the ghost is already climbing through. As Sidney stands in the dark of her daughter's room, looking out at the quiet Indiana street, the vibe is one of profound isolation. He has a husband, a home, and a life, but she is still the final girl standing alone against the shadow. The window trauma is a reminder that you can never truly unpack your go bag as long as there are windows in the world. The rhythm of the blade is coming, and Sidney is the only one who knows that the nice guy is just a ghost waiting for his cue. The burden of the past is a weight she will carry until the last mask is removed, and the sunrise of ghosts is the only light she has left to follow. The mistake has been made, the spark has been lit, and the rhythm is about to become a screaming reality once again. The morning light in the Evans kitchen is a deceptive golden hue, a vibe of normalcy that Sidney Prescott has spent nearly 2 decades perfecting. But the texture of this domestic safety is instantly shredded the moment her daughter, Tatum, walks into the room wearing a piece of the past. It's a simple jacket, A vintage, 90s style piece found in a box in the attic. But to Sidney, it is a ghost with a zipper. This is the moment where the inherited shadows of the Prescott bloodline move from the abstract into the physical. As a cinematic philosopher, I look at Sidney's reaction and bound. I don't see a mother annoyed by a borrowed piece of clothing. I see a survivor who realizes she accidentally left a spark of the nightmare in a place where her child could find it. The situation is a classic domestic beat, yet it carries the weight of 1,000 obituaries. Tatum thinks she's being vintage, a cool teenage choice to wear something her mother used to own during her mysterious one-semester stint at Windsor College in 1997. But for Sidney, that jacket is a rhythm of screams. It represents a time when she was being hunted by a half-brother she didn't know she had. A time when the shadow was so close it felt like her own skin. The observation of Sidney's face, the way the color drains, the way her grip on the coffee mug tightens, is the true rhythm of the scene. She isn't just looking at a jacket. She is looking at a mistake of her own making. She tried to bury her history in cardboard boxes, forgetting that ghosts don't stay packed away just because you put tape on the lid. The thematic irony of this chapter is the ultimate burden of the film. Sidney named her daughter Tatum to honor a lost piece of her soul, the girl who was her shield, and her best friend in the original Woodsboro massacre. She thought that by giving her daughter that name, she was creating a rhythm of love that could drown out the rhythm of the blade. But the opinion of the philosopher is that she was actually performing a high-stakes mistake of identity. By naming the girl Tatum, she didn't just give her a heritage. She gave her a role in a script she hadn't even finished reading. In 2026, being named Tatum in a house occupied by Sidney Prescott is like wearing a neon sign for every ghost with a grudge. The texture of the dialogue between mother and daughter is jagged and defensive. Tatum is frustrated by the false peace Sidney has enforced. She is 17, the same age Sidney was when the world first broke, and she senses that her mother is hiding a rhythm of her own life. She wants to know about Windsor, about the movies, about the stab books that mention her mother's name in every chapter. But Sidney's choice is silence. She believes that if she doesn't speak the words, the shadow won't find them. This is the mistake of every survivor parent, the belief that silence is a shield. In reality, silence is just a vacuum that the ghost eventually fills with its own distorted rhythm. Observationally, the film uses the texture of the jacket to highlight the generational gap in how trauma is perceived. To Tatum, the 90s are an aesthetic, a vibe of cool clothes and old movies. To Sidney, the 90s are a weight, a decade defined by the wet sound of a knife and the smell of a locker room after a slaughter. When Sidney tells her to take it off, it's a visceral command to shed the inherited shadow. She doesn't want her daughter to wear her pain. She doesn't want the rhythm of Windsor to touch the rhythm of Pine Grove. But the mistake has already been made. Tatum has already felt the texture of the past on her shoulders, and the ghost has already been invited to the table. The cinematic philosopher must ask, what is the human cost of being a legacy? Tatum Evans didn't ask to be the daughter of a legend. She didn't ask to be the final girl in waiting. She is a girl who wants to do theater, who wants to date a boy who sneaks in through windows, who wants to wear 90s vintage. But her very bloodline makes these normal choices dangerous. The shadow of her mother is so large that Tatum is perpetually standing in the shade. She is a ghost of her mother's past, living in a house that is essentially a museum of Sidney's choice to survive. The weight of her name is a constant feeling of impending doom that she doesn't yet have the vocabulary to describe. The vibe of the rehearsal that Tatum goes to later is a rhythm of performance that mirrors the rhythm of her life. She is playing a part both on stage and in her home. She is the good daughter, the brave girl, the strong legacy. But the mistake is that she is performing for an audience that is already sharpening its knives. The inherited shadows aren't just in the attic. They are in the way she looks at her mother, in the way she questions the false piece of Pine Grove. She is starting to realize that her mother's choice to live was a choice that required a permanent shield. And now, Tatum is the one who has to carry that shield. The rhythm of the chapter shifts when Tatum mentions that Sidney's childhood is completely off limits. This is the spark of their conflict. Tatum is a digital native. She has seen the books. She has seen the movies. She has done the deep dive into the stab lexicon. She knows more about her mother's shadows than her mother is willing to admit. This creates a texture of distrust, a feeling that Sidney doesn't trust her daughter to handle the truth. The human cost is a relationship built on a mistake of omission. Sidney is so busy protecting Tatum from the ghost that she is accidentally turning her daughter into a stranger. The cinematic philosopher sees the jacket as a sign of the inevitable. You cannot hide the shadow in the attic and expect it to stay there. The inherited shadows are a weight that must eventually be carried by the next generation. Sidney's choice to name her Tatum was a beautiful, tragic mistake that bound the girl to a rhythm of violence. The vibe of the film is now moving away from the false peace and toward the Prescott reality. The shadow has moved from the boxes to the girl, and the rhythm of the blade is beginning to harmonize with the rhythm of Tatum's heart. As Tatum leaves the house for her rehearsal wearing her mother's old jacket and carrying her mother's old name, the texture of the scene is one of absolute vulnerability. She's a girl walking into a trap she doesn't even know exists. The inherited shadows are no longer behind her. They are leading the way. The choice of the mother has become the burden of the daughter. And in the dark of Pine Grove, the ghost is watching, waiting for the Tatum of 2026 to make the same mistake as the Tatum of 1996. The bloodline is a rhythm, and the music is just starting to pick up speed. The human cost of Sidney Prescott's survival is about to be inherited by the one person she loves most. And the shadow is finally ready to step into the light. The coffee shop in Pine Grove is more than just a business for Sidney Prescott. It is a laboratory of controlled social interactions. It is the one place where she defines the lighting, the exits, and the rhythm of the people moving through her orbit. But the arrival of Lucas Bowden, the neighbor boy, the lighting technician, the self-proclaimed true crime junkie, disturbs the frequency of her carefully curated world. There is a specific oily texture to the way Lucas occupies space. He doesn't just walk into a room, he scans it. As a cinematic philosopher, I look at the character of Lucas and I see the modern evolution of the voyeur. In 1996, the stalker needed a bush to hide behind or a closet to crouch in. In 2026, the stalker just needs a high-speed connection and a working knowledge of the lighting board. The situation is a masterclass in low-key psychological friction. Lucas comes in for his 4 shots of espresso, a jittery, high-octane energy radiating off him that feels like a short circuit waiting to happen. He mentions the old Dateline specials, the Netflix documentaries, the New York Ghostface killings. He talks about these events with the detached, clinical enthusiasm of a boy dissecting a frog. To him, Sidney's life isn't a series of tragedies. It's a premier first-day topic for a podcast. This is the ultimate mistake of the digital generation. The belief that consuming a person's trauma through a screen gives you an intimate understanding of their soul. Lucas doesn't see the woman standing behind the counter. He sees a legendary archive, a piece of living history that he wants to organize and categorize. Observationally, the film uses Lucas to highlight the terrifying irony of modern safety. He is the techie. He is the guy who works the lighting board for the high school theater. He is the one who decides where the light falls and where the shadows are allowed to linger. In a slasher film, the person who controls the visibility is the person who holds the power of life and death. The weight of this realization is heavy in the way Sidney watches him. She sees the spark of obsession in his eyes, the same look she saw in Randy Meeks, but twisted by a decade of internet-fueled narcissism. Randy loved movies. Lucas loves the data of death. He is a boy who grew up in the shadow of the Stab franchise, and he has mistaken the rhythm of the movies for the rhythm of reality. The vibe of their interaction is one of profound maternal dread. Sidney's husband, Mark, is a man of physical protection, guns, badges, and locks. But Lucas represents a threat that a badge cannot stop: the digital gaze. He knows too much. He has done the deep dive. He mentions the Woodsboro murders and Dale Weathers books with a familiarity that feels like a violation. When Sidney shuts him down, telling him he should leave for rehearsal, the feeling in the room is one of jagged rejection. He's trying to push the shadow back out into the street. But Lucas is already part of the texture of her life. He lives next door. He is friends with her daughter. He is the person who will be standing in the dark of the theater while Tatum is on stage. The cinematic philosopher must interrogate the choice to make Lucas a lighting technician. It is a brilliant bit of subtext. A lighting guy's job is to stay invisible while making others visible. He exists in the blackness behind the spots, watching the performance from a position of total voyeuristic safety. This mirrors the way the modern stalker operate. They don't need to be in the frame. They just need to control the lens. The irony of Lucas being a good guy who helps out with the tech is that his very presence turns the theater into a panopticon. He is the ghost in the machine, the person who knows the layout of every room and the timing of every cue. The texture of the scene shifts when Lucas mentions AI and deepfakes later in the film. The spark of that interest is visible here in the coffee shop. He is a boy who believes that reality is something that can be manipulated, edited, and redistributed. He doesn't respect the weight of Sidney's secrets because he doesn't believe in the permanence of truth. To him, everything is content. The New York murders are a primo story. Sidney is a celebrity. The theater is a set. This disconnection from the human cost of violence makes him the most dangerous kind of neighbor. He isn't driven by a specific grudge. He is driven by a hollow, digital hunger for more information, more access, more light. The choice of the director to keep Lucas on the periphery of the frame during his early scenes is a sign of his predatory nature. He is always watching, always lingering just long enough to be noticed, but not long enough to be questioned. The burden of Sidney's past is a weight he wants to share, but only because he thinks it will make his own rhythm feel more significant. He is a parasite of legacy. He wants to be near the flame of Sidney Prescott because he has no light of his own. The mistake Sidney makes is thinking that she can manage him with cold politeness. She doesn't realize that for a boy like Lucas, even a negative interaction is a form of fuel. The cinematic philosopher sees the coffee shop as the final bastion of Sidney's false peace, and Lucas as the person who finally cracks the glass. When he mentions the Dateline special, he is bringing the outside world, the world that turns Sidney into a scream queen, directly into her sanctuary. He is forcing her to acknowledge that the shadow of Woodsboro has followed her into the light of Pine Grove. The feeling of the scene is one of inevitable decay. No matter how many espresso shots she pours, no matter how much she tries to blend into the town, the techie next door will always be there, adjusting the focus, waiting for the moment a performance slips. The human cost of this modern voyeurism is the total loss of privacy. Sidney cannot even be a neighbor without being a subject. The rhythm of her life is being tracked by a boy who views her as a data point. The weight of the mask is replaced by the weight of the camera, and in 2026, the camera is everywhere. Lucas is the personification of the era where stalking is just another form of social media engagement. He is the ghost who doesn't need to haunt a house because he's already hacked the security system. As Lucas leaves the shop, the vibe is one of lingering unease. Sidney stands alone behind her counter, the spark of the encounter fading into a heavy, cold dread. She knows that the lighting guy is the one who knows where the bodies are buried, because he's the one who provided the illumination for the dig. The rhythm of the hunt has begun, and the boy next door is the one who has his hand on the switch. The false piece is dying, and the techie is the one who is going to make sure the whole world gets to watch it burn in high definition. The shadow is no longer a mystery. It is a calculated choice made by a boy with a lighting board and a hunger for the limelight. The air in the Evans SUV is thick with the kind of silence that only exists between a mother who has seen too much, a daughter who feels she has seen too little. As Sidney Prescott drives her daughter home from school, the vibe is one of total, suffocating containment. Tatum calls it overdrive mama, a snarky, teenage label for the hypervigilance that has defined her entire existence. But as cinematic philosopher, I see something much more tragic under the surface. This isn't just a mother being extra. This is a woman attempting to hold back the tide with a plastic bucket. Sidney is in overdrive because she knows that in her world, a moment of relaxation isn't a break. It's an opening. The texture of her love has become a weight that threatens to crush the very person she is trying to save. The situation is sparked by the news of the Woodsboro replica murders. For the rest of the world, it's a shocking headline. For Sidney, it is a rhythm she recognizes in her bones. The mama trauma is no longer a psychological abstract. It is a physical choice to tighten the leash, to lock the doors, and to demand that her daughter stay within the shield of her vision. But the mistake is that Sidney is treating Tatum like a character in a script she can edit. She believes that by sheer force of will, she can keep the shadow from crossing the threshold of her home. She doesn't realize that by making the cage so small, she is making the ghost that much hungrier to get inside. Observationally, the film uses the texture of the school run and the domestic interior to highlight the friction between these two women. Tatum wants to be out of her cage. She wants the choice to go to parties, to date Ben, and to wear vintage jackets without a cross-examination. She sees her mother's fear as a burden that she has been forced to carry since birth. The irony is that Tatum is right. She is carrying the burden, but she doesn't understand the feeling of the weight. She thinks the mama trauma is an annoyance, a vibe of insanity that Sidney should have left in a therapist's office years ago. She doesn't see the rhythm of the bodies that Sidney has had to step over to get to this quiet life in Pine Grove. The cinematic philosopher must interrogate the human cost of this overprotection. Sidney's choice to shield Tatum from the truth of the stab movies, and the Woodsboro history has created a dangerous mistake of vulnerability. Because Tatum hasn't been allowed to see the shadow, she doesn't know how to recognize it when it starts to move. Sidney has made her soft. By being the shield, she has prevented Tatum from developing her own. The overdrive mama is effectively a gardener who refuses to let her plants see the sun because she's afraid they'll get burned, only to realize that they are now too weak to survive a storm. The vibe of the Evans household during this overdrive phase is one of absolute, jagged tension. Sidney is constantly scanning the perimeter, her eyes moving in a rhythm of defensive calculation. Every spark of noise, a car door slamming next door, the hum of the refrigerator, is interrogated for intent. This weight of vigilance is a shadow that falls over everything. It ruins dinner. It poisons conversation. It turns a home into a bunker. The mama trauma is a ghost that sits at the table with them, uninvited but ever present. Sidney is so busy being a bodyguard that she has forgotten how to be a mother. She's protecting Tatum's life, but she is stifling her soul. The thematic irony is that Sidney's overdrive mode is exactly what the killer wants. The ghost thrives on isolation. By cutting Tatum off from her friends, by being the overprotective hypocrite who refuses to let her daughter live a normal life, Sidney is inadvertently creating the perfect rhythm for a slasher climax. She is gathering all the targets into one small, safe room, forgetting that a room with only one way in is also a room with no way out. The mama trauma is the ultimate choice of the predator. It uses the victim's love as a spark to ignite the fire. Observationally, the film highlights the human cost through Tatum's growing resentment. She sees her mother as insane, a woman who is one step away from the psych ward. This feeling of disconnection is a mistake that the killer will eventually use as a weapon. When Tatum finally defies her mother and sneaks out, she isn't just being a rebel, she is running away from the weight of Sidney's fear. She is running toward the shadow because she has been told her whole life that the shadow doesn't exist. The mama trauma has made the ghost look like freedom. The cinematic philosopher sees the overdrive mama as a study in the rhythm of regret. Sidney is trying to atone for the deaths of Tatum Riley, of Derek, of Hallie, of Dewey. She is trying to save everyone she lost by saving this one girl. But you cannot balance the weight of the dead with the life of the living. It's a mistake of cosmic proportions. The burden of the past is too heavy for one 17-year-old girl to bear, even if she has Sidney Prescott's blood in her veins. The overdrive is a sign that Sidney is losing her grip on the false peace she worked so hard to build. The texture of the scene where Sidney finally breaks and tells Tatum we're going is one of absolute desperation. The rhythm of her voice is sharp, frantic, and devoid of the warmth that Tatum needs. The choice to run is a sign that the shield has failed. Sidney has realized that Pine Grove was never a refuge, it was just a larger cage. The mama trauma has finally overtaken the reality of their lives. They are no longer a family. They are casualties in waiting. The overdrive has become a rhythm of panic that is blowing them toward the final confrontation. As they pack their go-bags, a choice that Sidney made years ago but Tatum only now discovers, the vibe is one of total, cold-blooded finality. The false peace is officially over. The shadow is no longer a distant threat. It is a feeling in the room. Sidney is in overdrive because she knows the rhythm of the hunt has reached its peak. She is trying to save her daughter from a ghost she created by naming her Tatum. The human cost of being overdrive mama is the realization that no matter how fast you drive, the shadow is already in the backseat. The mama trauma is the ultimate burden, and in the dark of the Indiana night, Sidney is about to find out that you can't protect a child from a legacy that is written in her own name. The choice has been made, the spark has been lit, and the overdrive is about to lead them straight into the mouth of the nightmare. The phone doesn't just ring in Pine Grove, it screams. In the quiet, expensive silence of Sidney Prescott's kitchen, the vibration of a smartphone on a granite countertop is a jagged intrusion, a frequency that shouldn't exist in this timeline. When Sidney picks up that device, she isn't just answering a call, she is opening a vein. The vibe of this moment is one of total, bone-chilling violation. It is the return of a psychological ghost, a sound that has been buried under 30 years of therapy, white noise, and forced forgetting. As a cinematic philosopher, I look at the framing of Sidney's face in this sequence and I don't see a woman being pranked. I see a woman whose internal sanctuary has been breached by a ghost that lives in the wires. The return of the voice is the ultimate script audit of Sidney's life. For decades, the voice of Ghostface, that gravelly, playful, and utterly lethal tone provided by Roger L. Jackson, has been the rhythm of her nightmares. But this time, the texture of the threat is different. The voice isn't just a mask, it's a claim. When the caller identifies as Stu Maher, the feeling in the room turns to ice. Sidney knows Stu is dead. She watched the television set crush his skull in 1996. She felt the wet rhythm of his blood on her hands. But in the world of a scream queen, death is just a suggestion. The irony is that it doesn't even matter if it's really Stu or a digital trick. The human cost is the same. Sidney's reality has been destabilized. The shield she built in Indiana was designed to stop a man with a knife, but it has no defense against a ghost with a dial tone. Observationally, the film uses this phone call to dismantle the false piece of the previous chapters. The rhythm of the conversation is a predatory dance. The voice knows too much. It mentions the new town, the husband, and most cruelly, the daughter. The choice to have the killer target Tatum Evans while using the voice of the man who helped kill the original Tatum Riley is a mistake of cosmic cruelty. It is a spark that turns Sidney's maternal love into a weapon against her. The return of the voice isn't just about a serial killer. It's about the weight of a legacy that refuses to stay in the ground. Sidney is forced to realize that her daughter's name isn't just an honor. It's a coordinate for the shadow. The cinematic philosopher must look at the texture of Sidney's reaction. She doesn't scream. She doesn't drop the phone. Instead, she becomes a soldier. The rhythm of her breathing changes, sharpening into a defensive pulse. This is the Prescott reality asserting itself. She has spent 17 years pretending to be a mama, but the voice reminds her that she is a survivor. The human cost is the immediate erasure of her Pine Grove persona. In the space of a 60-second phone call, the coffeehouse owner is dead, and the final girl is reborn. It is a choice made for her by a ghost she thought she had outrun. The thematic irony of the scene is that technology has made the shadow more powerful, not less. In 1996, a phone call was limited by a cord and a local exchange. In 2026, the voice is everywhere. It's in the cloud, it's in the smart home system, it's in the pocket of every teenager in the world. The mistake of the digital age is the belief that connectivity makes us safer. In reality, it just provides more avenues for the ghost to enter the house. The return of the voice is a sign that the barricades are useless. The rhythm of the blade is now traveling at the speed of light, and Sidney is standing in the middle of the field with nowhere to hide. Observationally, the film highlights the weight of the theater mention. By placing the shadow outside the high school theater, the killer is moving the performance from the past into the present. Tatum is rehearsing a play, a choice of art and expression, while the voice is rehearsing a slaughter. The vibe is one of total, impending dread. Sidney's rhythm is now dictated by the killer's cues. She has to run, she has to fight, she has to play the part of the avenging mother whether she wants to or not. The human cost is the total loss of agency. The voice is the director now, and Sidney is just an actor in a script she didn't write. The cinematic philosopher sees the voice as a physical presence in the room. It's a texture of static and malice that fills the gaps between Sidney's thoughts. It is the burden of her origin story, a ghost that refuses to be silenced by time or distance. The mistake of Pine Grove was thinking that geographical distance equals psychological safety. But the voice proves that the shadow is a rhythm that lives inside Sidney. It is a part of her bloodline. When she hears that dead man's laugh, she isn't just hearing a killer. She is hearing the rhythm of her own life story. It is a choice of the universe to keep her in the red mist. The texture of the scene where she records the call is a sign of her desperation. She is trying to turn the ghost into data. She is trying to give the shadow a shape that Mark and the police can track. But the weight of the voice is too heavy for a simple recording. It's a feeling that can't be captured on a hard drive. The human cost is the realization that even if they catch the man behind the mask, the voice will stay with her forever. It is a permanent violation, a rhythm that will play in her head every time a phone rings for the rest of her life. The vibe of the film shifts completely in this chapter. The false piece is officially cremated. The mama trauma is now a battlefield reality. Sidney's choice to run to the theater is the spark that begins the final hunt. She is moving toward the shadow to protect her legacy, but she knows that she is walking back into the rhythm of the kill. The return of the voice is the sign that the experience has begun. No more trivia, no more overprotective lectures, No more vintage jackets. Just the mother, the daughter, and the voice that has been waiting in the dark for 30 years. As Sidney grabs her keys and runs for the door, the texture of the scene is one of absolute, cold-blooded urgency. The rhythm of Pine Grove has been replaced by the rhythm of Woodsboro Tower. The ghost is no longer a memory. It is a physical weight on her chest. The human cost of being Sidney Prescott is the knowledge that the voice will always find you, no matter how many espresso shots you pour or how many police chiefs you marry. The mistake was thinking she could ever be anyone else. The shadow is back, and it's calling from inside her own name. The return of the voice is the ultimate burden. And in the dark of the Indiana night, Sidney is finally ready to answer. The high school theater is a place where shadows are cultivated by design. It is a world of velvet curtains, false fronts, and the heavy, dusty scent of old paint and nervous sweat. In Pine Grove, this space should have been a sanctuary for Tatum Evans, a place where she could shed the weight of being Sidney Prescott's daughter and become someone, or something, else. But as the rhythm of the rehearsal begins to falter, the theater reveals its true texture. It isn't a place of art. It is a trap built of pulleys, ropes, and blind spots. As a cinematic philosopher, I look at the vibe of this rehearsal and see the ultimate irony of the Prescott legacy. Tatum is trying to learn how to perform, while the ghost in the wings is preparing to show her that in her world, the only performance that matters is the one where you fight to stay alive. The situation is almost grotesquely comic before it turns lethal. Tatum is dressed in a fluffy dog costume, a literal skin of humiliation that masks her grit and her fire. She is playing a secondary role, a background character with a one-word script. This is a sign of her life in Pine Grove. She is a girl trying to be small, trying to be soft, trying to hide from the spotlight that has burned her mother for 30 years. But the director, Mr. Willis, won't let her hide. He stands in the center of the house, a man of pompous choices, and demands that she channel some of her mother's legendary fire. He is a man who treats Sidney's trauma as a character note, an interesting vibe to be used for a high school play. This is the mistake of the town. They see the Scream Queen as an icon to be imitated, never realizing that the fire he's asking for is a rhythm of pain that no child should ever have to touch. Observationally, the film uses the texture of the stage to emphasize the vulnerability of the young. Look at the lifts and landings exercise. Hannah, the self-proclaimed diva, is hoisted into the air by a system of ropes and counterweight. She is suspended, dangling above the floorboards, a physical proof of total helplessness. The vibe is one of artificial flight, but the weight is all too real. In the dark of the tech booth, Aaron, the boy responsible for the rhythm of the lights, is the first to feel the shadow. He isn't killed in a grand cinematic way. He is extinguished. The ghost moves with a pulse that is faster than the theater's cues. When the house lights fail to come up, the mistake of the evening is finalized. The performance has moved from the stage into the shadows, and the script has been rewritten in blood. The cinematic philosopher must peer into the irony of the death scene. Hannah is still suspended, calling out to Aaron for a softer landing, unaware that the person holding her life in their hands has changed. The rhythm of her descent is no longer a choice of the tech guy. It is a rhythm of cruelty dictated by the ghost. When she finally realizes that the figure in the booth isn't her friend, the feeling is one of absolute, vertiginous terror. She is a girl who spent her life wanting to be seen, and now she is being watched by the only person in the world she should have feared. The theater of blood is a place where the performance is final. There are no understudies for the dead. The human cost is the sudden, jagged end of two lives that were just beginning to find their voice. The texture of the violence in the theater is different from the Woodsboro replica. In the replica, the ghost was mocking the past. Here, the ghost is violating the future. By killing Tatum's friends in the place where she was supposed to be safe, the shadow is making a statement about the burden of the Prescott name. It is telling Sidney that there is no shield big enough to protect the people around her. The theater is a sign that the world is a stage for the ghost, and every person Tatum cares about is just an extra waiting for their exit line. The mistake was thinking that a high school in Indiana was a different world than a high school in California. The rhythm of the kill is universal. Observationally, the film highlights the parental dread through Sidney's desperate rhythm as she drives to the school. She knows the vibe of a theater attack. She remembers the stage at Windsor College in 1997. She remembers the shadows of the Greek tragedy that she was forced to star in. The choice to have the new ghost target a theater is a direct psychological spark intended to break her shield. The killer isn't just looking for blood. They are looking for a reenactment. They want Sidney to see the pattern and realize that she can never escape the rhythm of her own origin story. The theater of blood is a mirror, and the feeling it reflects is one of absolute recurring grief. The cinematic philosopher sees the fluffy costume as a vibe of lost innocence. Tatum is literally trying to shed the skin of her mother's legacy, but she is doing it by putting on another mask. The irony is that the ghost is the only person who sees her for who she truly is, the final girl in training. When the blood hits the stage, the fake props and the false fronts are revealed for the lies they are. The only thing that is real in the theater is the weight of the knife and the rhythm of the scream. The human cost is the total destruction of the false peace that Pine Grove promised. Tatum isn't a dog, she's a Prescott. And a Prescott only learns who they are when the house lights go dark. The vibe of the aftermath in the theater is one of hollow, cold-blooded silence. The rhythm of the sirens outside is a distant, useless noise. Sidney arrives to find the pattern repeated, her daughter standing in the wreckage of someone else's script. The theater of blood has served its purpose. It has sparked the hunt. It has shown Sidney that the shadow is here, and that it knows all her triggers. The choice to have Tatum rehearse for a play about healing or discovery is the final, bitter mistake of the director. There is no healing in the theater tonight. There is only the sign of the mask and the rhythm of the blade. As the police tape is stretched across the stage doors, the texture of the film changes. We are no longer in a suburban drama, we are in a screaming reality. The theater of blood was the opening act, and the human cost has already been established. Sidney looks at the stage and sees the ghost of her own past, realizing that the script she thought she finished in 1996 was just a first draft. The inherited shadows have finally found the light, and the rhythm of the story is now a rhythm of pursuit. Tatum Evans has been initiated into the performance of a lifetime, and the only way to get a happy ending is to kill the director. The cinematic philosopher knows that in the theater, the vibe of the finale is always a rhythm of blood. Sidney and Tatum are now co-stars in a script written by a ghost. The theater of blood was just the set design. The real event is coming, and it's going to be played out on the ground of their own home. The false piece is dead. The theater is closed, and the rhythm of the kill is the only music left to play. The weight of the name Tatum is now a heavy proof that the shadow is never done with the bloodline. The curtain has risen, and the human cost of the next act is going to be higher than anything Sidney Prescott has ever had to pay. The theater doors in Pine Grove are no longer a threshold for art. They are a boundary line for a crime scene that feels ancient despite the fresh blood on the floorboards. As the emergency lights pulse against the brick exterior, creating a jagged rhythmic heartbeat of red and blue, the vibe is one of total, professional collapse. This is the moment where the guilt of the survivor ceases to be a private haunting for Sidney Prescott and becomes a public weight for her husband, Mark Evans. As a cinematic philosopher, I look at the way Joel McHale's character occupies this space. I see a man trying to apply the texture of the law to a situation that is governed by the rhythm of a nightmare. Mark is the police chief, the designated protector of this town, but standing in the shadow of Sidney's past. He looks like a man trying to stop a flood with a notepad. The situation is a brutal collision of two worlds. Mark's world is one of duty, facts, and choices made in the light of day. Sidney's world is a shadow that has traveled across state lines to find her. The observation of them standing together amidst the sirens is the true human cost of their marriage. Mark didn't just marry a woman, he married a ghost. He accepted a burden he didn't fully understand, thinking that his badge and his sturdiness could act as a shield for the most targeted woman in American history. But as he looks at the bodies of Hannah and Aaron, two teenagers who were just extras in the theater until the ghost made them casualties, the feeling of the evening is one of absolute, professional grief. He is realizing that his authority is a mistake in the eyes of a killer who doesn't respect the rhythm of the law. The cinematic philosopher must peer into the texture of Mark's frustration. He is a man who deals with the ground of reality, but the Stu Mosher mention has turned his investigation into a ghost hunt. When Sidney tells him about the phone call, the vibe changes from a standard homicide to a legacy event. The guilt that Sidney carries is a physical weight that she passes to him in this moment. He feels like the magnetic north for death, a woman whose mere presence in Pine Grove has acted as a spark for a slaughter. Every time she tries to build a normal life, the rhythm of the blade finds a way to synchronize with it. Her choice to stay in Pine Grove, to marry Mark, and to have Tatum now feels like a mistake of monumental proportions. She isn't just a survivor, she is a carrier of the virus. Observationally, the film uses the texture of the police procedure to highlight how useless it is against the ghost. Mark is talking about tracing calls, analyzing deepfakes, and securing the perimeter. He is using the language of a modern protector. But Sidney knows that the shadow doesn't care about a perimeter. The ghost is already inside the rhythm of their lives. The feeling of the scene is one of inevitable decay. Mark tells her, "You are not alone, we got this," but the rhythm of his voice lacks the spark of true conviction. He is a man of the law, realizing he is trapped in a script written by a madman. The human cost is the slow, agonizing realization that he cannot be the shield Sidney needs. He is just another potential victim with a title. The guilt of the survivor is a burden that Sidney has managed for 30 years. But seeing it reflected in Mark's eyes is a new kind of pain. He feels the grief of a man who has failed his first major duty. He promised to keep this town safe. He promised to keep his family safe. And yet, the shadow has bypassed all his choices and struck at the heart of the community. The mistake was thinking that Pine Grove was a refuge. The rhythm of the film is now one of total, cold-blooded urgency. Mark wants to solve the crime, but Sidney knows that you don't solve a ghost face killing, you survive it. The texture of their relationship is being redefined by the weight of the bodies in the theater. The cinematic philosopher sees Mark's badge as a vibe of false security. In the world of Scream 7, the law is just a ghost of an older, simpler time. The shadow operates in the gaps between the rules. When Mark talks about the resources of the state police, he is trying to maintain a rhythm of order that the killer has already shattered. The human cost is the total erosion of his professional identity. He is no longer the police chief, he is the husband of the target. His choice to protect his family is now in direct conflict with his choice to lead the investigation. He is a man divided, a shadow of the leader he was supposed to be. The feeling of the scene where they discuss the Stu recording is a sign of the digital nightmare they are in. Mark is trying to find a technical explanation, a deepfake, a voice changer, a mistake in the data. He wants to believe that the ghost is a physical reality he can catch and handcuff. But Sidney knows that the voice is a rhythm of terror that doesn't need a physical body to be real. The guilt she feels is the knowledge that she has brought this rhythm to Mark's doorstep. She has turned his quiet Indiana town into a theater of blood, and the human cost is just beginning to be tallied. The vibe of the chapter is one of professional grief transitioning into personal panic. Mark is trying to be the shield, but the shadow is already behind him. The rhythm of the investigation is being dictated by the ghost, and every choice Mark makes is a mistake that the killer has already anticipated. The texture of the film is now one of absolute, jagged vulnerability. Sidney and Mark are survivors in a world that is designed to kill them. The weight of the name Tatum, the weight of the Martyr House, the weight of the voice, it's all a burden that Mark is only just starting to feel. As the house lights of the theater are finally extinguished, leaving the stage in total cold darkness, the vibe is one of total impending doom. The guilt of the survivor has found a new host in Mark Evans. He is a man who wanted to be the hero, but he is realizing that in Sidney's story, the hero is usually the person who dies so she can live. The human cost of his love for her is the rhythm of the hunt. The shadow is moving, and the mistake was thinking that a badge could stop a ghost. The feeling of the night is a sign that the Prescott reality has fully overtaken the Pine Grove piece. The burden is shared now, but the rhythm of the blade only needs one heart to stop. The guilt is the only thing that is truly permanent, and the shadow is finally ready to claim its next survivor. The air in the Evans master bedroom is thick with the scent of unwashed adrenaline and the cold, metallic realization that a home is only a house until the shadows find the door. As Sidney Prescott stands over her bed, the vibe is no longer one of a wife and mother. It is the focused, jagged energy of a soldier who has been living in a false peace for 17 years. This is the moment of the go-bag philosophy, a grim, physical admission that Sidney never truly believed the world would let her stay in the light. As a cinematic philosopher, I look at the simple, black nylon bag sitting on the duvet, and I don't see luggage. I see a burden of readiness. It is a texture of life that Tatum Evans, born into the quiet safety of Indiana, cannot fathom. To Tatum, a bag is for a sleepover. To Sidney, a bag is for a permanent flight. The situation is a jagged domestic rupture. Mark, the police chief and husband, is leaving to do his duty, to sweep the house and secure the neighborhood. He still believes in the rhythm of the law, the idea that a perimeter can be drawn around evil. But Sidney is already moving to a different pulse. She knows that the shadow isn't outside. It's already part of their timeline. The observation of her reaching for that bag is the true spark of the scene. It is a choice made in the dark of her own mind years ago. A silent mistake of hope that she is now correcting. She told Tatum to grab her stuff, but the feeling in the room is one of absolute cold-blooded urgency. Sidney's done with the performance of being a regular citizen. The go bag is her ghost, finally stepping out of the closet. Observationally, the film uses the texture of the bag to highlight the generational rift between mother and daughter. When Sidney asks for Tatum's go bag, and Tatum responds that she unpacked it a long time ago, the weight of the statement is devastating. It is the human cost of Sidney's attempt to give her daughter a normal life. Tatum unpacked her bag because she believed in the